Craig. Just give me a minute. I will just wait for a few seconds for. Okay. Hello, everybody. We are very much on time today. I'm going to invite Craig to my Instagram live, and we will have a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you see me? How are you?
I'm great. Wow, look at this view and look at the light in New York City in the morning. How wonderful is it?
Can you see the background? I'm trying to give you a view of the skyline.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do see the Empire State Building. Oh my God. Yes,
okay.
and
I'll get a good spot.
You give you an amazing spot. I will just would be glaring into the spot from morning till night and just and monitoring the different light of the day, just like you do. And I'll talk about it actually a bit later.
Okay.
But great to have you here. And I'm sorry that we're a bit early perhaps for you, but this 12-hour difference. Are you adjusting your camera?
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to just plug in. I need a little bit more battery juice. That's all. We're all set.
Okay, yes, please make sure that your battery is not. Okay, I don't see you.
Okay, we're good. Can you see me?
Okay, yes.
I'm back. Okay. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you? Good to see you.
It's going to be a beautiful day here. I can tell already.
I can see. Oh my God, it's beautiful. The sky is blue. I wish I could be there, seriously. But, I'm there with you in the spirit and with New York.
How are things over in
Singapore? Yes, I just make sure that your microphone and that is well. I can hear it, but just.
Okay, are you? Yeah, it says I'm not on the app.
Are you on the phone or you're on the computer?
No, I'm on the phone. It just I lost the connection, but you can see me okay?
I can see you okay, but most importantly that I need to hear you well as well. So.
All right, is this? Should I try my AirPods, or do you think this is good?
No, it's good. It's good. It's fine.
Okay.
So we will start. So I will say a few words about the conversations with Olga. Then I will do a short introduction, just a general introduction about you, and then we'll just talk.
Great. Okay.
Right. Well, hello everyone. You're right, I'm sure. Hello everyone again. Good evening, Singapore and Asia. Good morning, New York, and good afternoon, Europe and London. It's really, really nice to have you all here. Some of you have been following conversations with Olga and me personally for a long time. Some of you are just the first time joining us today. So I will say a few words about conversations with Olga, and then I will do a little bit of a bio for Craig, and then we'll just have an incredible conversation. So I started conversations with Olga last year during the Circuit Breaker. It is an IGTV series fostering intellectual and cultural exchange between influential individuals from all around the world. My main mission has been for all these years to bring international culture and arts to Singapore, and this is yet one of the initiatives that I started during the COVID-19, and just to make it all global. All my series could be viewed and listened to on my IGTV at events by Olga, as well as on YouTube and Olga Iserlis. So please enjoy today's conversation and just feel free to link to any of the episodes anytime. So today I'm excited to introduce my guest for the episode number 19, my friend, a very talented person, co-founder of the TriBeCa Film Festival, author, real estate investor, Craig Hatkoff. Craig is the co-founder of the incredibly well-known TriBeCa Film Festival, together with Robert De Niro and Jane Rothenthal, soon after the September 11 attack in New York. He has been the chief curator of the annual TriBeCa Disruptive Innovation Award that he co-founded as well. It celebrates and honors people who are making positive impact in society and present disruptive innovations across the full spectrum of traditional and non-traditional domains. And we'll talk about it, of course, later today in conversation. Craig is also the founder of a Turtle Pond Foundation, a private entertainment and media company based in New York. Its interests include a variety of children's publishing ventures with his daughters, as well as other media investments. Besides that, Craig wears a completely different hat, or used to wear a different hat, but he was born in New York and received an MBA from Columbia University. He started his career actually in real estate in chemical bank, where he became one of the pioneers of the real estate securitization industry. Mouthful. He then co-founded Victor Capital Group, a leading real estate merchant bank, as well as a capital trust, a New York Stock Exchange company. He left Capital Trust to pursue entrepreneurial and creative endeavors, focusing on the field of disruptive innovation. Craig has also served on several nonprofit boards as well as on a number of public boards, including Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Wildlife Direct, Board of Manhattan Community College Foundation, the Child Mind Institute, the TriBeCa Film Institute, of which he was a co-founder, and of the Mandela Institute for Humanity that he has founded by Ndaba Mandela, grandson of Nelson Mandela, actually, among so many others. So, Craig, your life is amazing, and we want to hear your life story. You are a Renaissance man, and yet at the same time, you have a very much of a business brain. Can you please share with us how do you actually manage, basically, exercise both sides of your brain in full?
Well, good morning, Olga, and thank you so much. It's great to see you. Thank you for having me on the show. As I guess you've outlined, I have a rather eclectic career path, and
Yes.
Someone actually described it once as I've gone from Wall Street to Main Street to Sesame Street, and that sort of that's sort of my career path. And I think part of it, the left-right brain connection is really fascinating. And I was born lefty, so I'm a left-handed person, which means my right brain, in theory, is a little bit more activated in general than the left. But I also, interestingly enough, I'm not fully ambidextrous, but I do half of my activities with my right hand. So I play guitar righty, I play golf righty, I bat righty, I play hockey righty, but most of my other activities are left-handed. So I've kind of got this yin and yang between
it's amazing. Not that many people do. Yes.
No, and don't ask me how or why I ended up, switching back and forth. But I think it sort of gave me the ability to, at least tap into both sides of the brain.
Yeah.
And while I tend to be, my real pleasure in life is on the more creative endeavors, I've had a pretty, serious business career as well. So the left-right brain, when you get into artistic endeavors that really rely on the more intuitive elements, business is generally perceived to be much more linear, analytical. But what I have found, and this is where the left-right brain dynamic comes in, is most of my business decisions at the first glance, and it's that first 5 seconds, are based on intuition. So if you rely on your intuition, which really gets fostered, cultivated, expanded by using the right side, it helps you on the left side as well. And so it's balancing the rational with the intuitive, and relying candidly in today's world where things are not always what they seem. That intuition really is sort of the driver of my life story, my career path. If I have a feeling about something that really gets me excited, I usually go for it. If I'm not excited,
I should ask you advice more often, Craig. Really, I'll rely on your intuition as well.
Yes. So I heavily rely on my intuition, and it's so far it seems to have worked out okay. So you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So this is probably how I'm going to be for the next few chapters.
No, it's wonderful. I mean, you're a lucky man, but you obviously know how to maneuver those both sides of your brain based on your intuition, of course. We will talk about the passion of animals as well as about your acclaimed children's books in a bit, but do you think that even though being financially savvy and having such a interesting and successful financial career, you think September 11 was a starting point for you to change your career, to change your vision, and actually life in general?
Oh, absolutely. September 11th, our offices at TriBeCa are about 8 blocks north of the World Trade Center. And so when September 11th hit New York, it was, for me, it was a crease in time. And, maybe we'll come back and talk about what's going on in today's world with COVID, but there's sort of a bookend between 2001 when September 11th came and the festival was started as an effort to get people back on the streets of Manhattan.
And exactly. Let me just mention a few words for some of our listeners who might not be that familiar with TriBeCa Film Festival, but I'm sure most of them do. But I just want to mention that Craig, with his former wife Jane Rosenthal and Robert De Niro, founded the TriBeCa Film Festival in response, as we mentioned, to September 11 attacks on the World Trade Center and the consequent loss of vitality in the TriBeCa neighborhood, which is a lower part of Manhattan. Its purpose was to stimulate the economic and cultural revitalization of Lower Manhattan through the annual celebration of film, music, and culture in general. And today, the festival is one of the most celebrated festivals, I believe, in the U.S. for socially charged independent films, and yet the program, of course, broadened it tremendously. Can you tell us who came with this an idea, and how did this whole thing started after September 11?
Well, it really started, I've known Robert De Niro since the late 70s, so I've known him for a long time. I actually met Jane, my former wife, through Bob. They had been working together, but I had known Bob along the way, and Bob and Jane had always talked about doing a festival well before September 11th, but there really didn't seem to be a need for another festival in the world at that time. But when September 11th hit, Bob and Jane, this was really sort of their making, said now is the time to do a festival. It has a real purpose. The purpose is to help us sort of transition from the trauma and the sort of commemorating September 11th while moving into sort of life goes on and we now have to celebrate. But it was a balance between commemoration and celebration, and that was really sort of the genesis. The real driver of having the festival was somewhere around October, November of 2001, right after September 11th. Jane and I went down to Little Italy to try and support the restaurants, and when we got down to Little Italy, there were literally no customers. I think there was one other party, and all the staffs were standing on the stoops looking for customers. And what happened after that, we said, how do we get people back to the restaurants? So we started an initiative called Dinner Downtown. And this is before people actually had email. It was a fax campaign where, I'll invite 10 friends and have each of your 10 friends invite 10 friends. And we did a series of dinners where we descended on Lower Manhattan, Chinatown, Financial District, Little Italy, with about 1,000 people to fill up the restaurants. And after that first event, Jane came home one day and said, Bob and I want to do the festival now. I'm just sort of a business person. I'm not in the film business. And they said, will you help? So I started off, I went to a meeting. That meeting, I've since moved on from the festival on a day-to-day basis. But that meeting went on for about 18 years as we built TriBeCa.
So what was it? Was it more of a personal, emotional reason, or it was also a curiosity aspect to this whole project when it started?
Well, at the beginning, it was definitely, how do we help? What can we do that, particularly for Bob and Jane, who are major storytellers, what can we do? And it really was not so much the curiosity. It was, as I'm going to use the expression, we weren't brave, we were oblivious. And we had no idea what we were stepping into. And sort of the history of TriBeCa, the origin story, is the whole festival got pulled together in 120 days, which you're in the event business. The planning cycle for most events that involve sponsors, films, a lot of moving parts, usually is about at least a year. But
of this category, yes.
Exactly. But I'd say it never, on paper, the festival never made, how are you guys going to get all these films, all these people? But it literally, I'm going to use the expression, got willed into existence. Everybody wanted it to happen. Everybody participated and contributed. And lo and behold, we had no idea what was going to happen. But the first one, I think we had 150,000 people showed up to the first festival.
So what was let us go back to the inaugural festival. Can you tell us about the criteria of participants who were chosen at that time for the first festival? Or how did you,
yeah, it's kind of there's a fairly well-defined circuit for people. There's Cannes, there's Sundance, there's Venice, and all of a sudden, in the middle of everything, TriBeCa pops up. So we weren't part of the traditional film festival circuit, certainly in our first year. And I'd say the criteria was, for us, success was, could we get any films up on screens in Lower Manhattan? That was the main criteria. So the first festival was really, I'll call it the beta test and rapid prototyping. But I think the first year, I think we had something like 150 films. But our mission wasn't really to be the dominant marketplace like a Sundance or a Cannes. The mission of the festival was really to be a people's festival and doing it to help celebrate and bring life back to Lower Manhattan.
Amazing. Can you please tell me about what was perhaps one of the most memorable moments for you at that time for the first festival? Because it's like it's a giving birth basically to incredible child, perhaps roosters. What was the most emotional part for you?
I'd say it's like giving birth to a child and ending up with sextuplets. You didn't know what was in there. I'd say for me, it became very real for the opening ceremony, which came together really at the last moment. And we did it. Mike Bloomberg hosted the opening press conference. We had Nelson Mandela appeared. Bill Clinton was there. We had sort of every celebrity you could possibly imagine. And it was just sort of the first time that it was probably the first group gathering, even just for the press.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful day. It was the end of the day. And all of a sudden, you could feel a change that this was the beginning of renewal.
Beginning of the new real, but yes, probably of the positivity. Obviously,
yes.
It gave incredible positivity to not only New York and lower part of Manhattan, but probably the humankind who knew about it, for sure. Amazing. Obviously we spoke about it, and I've listened to some of your interviews where you have, where I've learned about your visit to Hiroshima, which is another devastating ground zero. And we'll talk about it later when we'll talk about the Disruptive Awards. But what are the parallels between September 11 and Hiroshima that you spoke about?
Well, I think the obvious connection, which, it was sitting there right in front of us, I use the expression a lot, hiding in plain sight, was very quickly after September 11th, the World Trade Center and the site became known as Ground Zero, which was indirectly a reflection of Ground Zero in Hiroshima. Or I've learned some people say Hiroshima, some people say Hiroshima. I tend to go back and forth, so pardon my...
yes, me too. Pardon me as well, yes.
Yes, and so, it's a very interesting about culture, how we pronounce words. But
yes.
The connection is, what do you do after you're, effectively for Hiroshima, your city's been wiped off the map. TriBeCa needed to have a new vision, but from Ground Zero to Ground Zero, when I put the two cities together, it just sort of popped up as an obvious parallel.
Yes. Exactly, and and festival obviously tremendously evolved over these years. And you said to me once again that you're in the business of connecting dots. So I'm sure now you draw a parallel and connection to COVID-19 pandemic, just as you did with Hiroshima. Can you please share with us your thoughts and feelings? With relevance, perhaps, with even greater importance of the festival due to the ground zero, the acute ground zero that we all living through for so many months now.
Well, I think that's one of the big takeaways, is that we are all connected, interconnected at a very deep level. And what happens, just as an example, at a wet market in Wuhan, if that's where it started, can impact the entire world. So I think it underscores September 11th was a little bit more localized. It was, more of a physical attack. We knew, until we had to go through what had been a 10-year rebuilding process. Most of Lower Manhattan has recovered dramatically, or up at least until COVID. COVID is a more insidious version, the invisible equal opportunity offender. It impacted everyone. It was not ideological. It was something that we have to realize that the world is going to have to figure out how to get along and solve some of these problems. And, it does beg the question, and I'm an optimistic person, but this was COVID-19. What else is coming down the road? And will we learn the lessons? How to cope going forward?
Yes, well, very true. And actually, as you rightly said, that we do need to learn now how to live in a new normal after COVID-19. And do you think that the TriBeCa Film Festival actually awards as well as arts all over the world will play even more important, more profound role to bring people together? For example, in Singapore, I am involved with art scene here, this theater in particular, and we just had the Singapore Arts Festival, and I saw the crave and the support and the need for the people to embrace this cultural time for the soul for themselves, because I feel that it brings people together, it unites, and it creates kind of a kinder community. And I do keep thinking about your quote, seeds will create more seeds. This is your quote, this is what you said. Can you please tell me what's your take on it in terms of the involvement of the festival moving forward?
Well, I think the arts have always been a leading indicator. The early adopters, and I'm just going to use the urban context. Artists need space, they need light, they need to be inspired, they need energy, and they can move very quickly, both psychologically, sociologically, and emotionally. And the arts have almost always led, and it's really one of the lessons that I've learned is we pay much too much attention in today's world to the technology and not enough to the cultural aspects. And one of my missions through the Disruptor Awards has been to help bridge what we call the techno-cultural divide. And culture writ large is largely formed by artists who tend to think outside the box, see the world in a different way. And I think that's really kind of one of the drivers, is the importance of culture. Culture will drive every recovery.
I'm so with you. Thank you for saying that, because I feel exactly the same. And in this oversaturated technological world, the core of culture and I think really should not be neglected for sure. It has been, of course, a very prestigious event, and it's reached a completely international acclaim. Was it something that you've ever imagined then when you first started it?
I never imagined back then, and I still can't imagine that I ended up being part of this. It was a once in a lifetime experience. It was very challenging. You have to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That you don't have all the answers. You just have to roll with the punches. And think of a festival as a million problems that require a million solutions. It's not just one big problem. So whether it's ticketing, whether it's getting talent from one coast to the other, it's just a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
And I was not on that side of the business. I was more, the sponsorship and, developing the business plan, but it all comes together. When we started, I think the first year we had 1,000 volunteers. And, how do we even get people into seats during the middle of, this was back in September 11th. We didn't really there was only one movie theater chain downtown. So we were using outdoor screening venues, gymnasiums, anything you could show a film on was sort of really what the mission was. Films on screens. That was the mission.
Yeah. Incredible. And you just mentioned the fundraising that obviously was happening at that time. And that brings me to the initiative that was launched. It's called We Are One, which is an initiative for COVID-19 relief funds. And that was developed, I believe, in partnership with YouTube. Can you tell us a few words about this project and the success of it?
Yes. And I wasn't directly involved, but it involved pulling together, as in times of crisis we often do, and not obvious bedfellows. In the film festival business, I would call it heavy co-opetition. So everybody needs to cooperate, but they're also competitive. And all the film festivals and a lot of other institutions banded together. They used the YouTube platform and did. In COVID, it was pretty clear we weren't going into movie theaters. So how do you do these things? You find different versions of whether it's streaming, online, whatever the distribution channels are. And that changed dramatically since 2001.
Yes, I can imagine. And of course, do you think the TriBeCa Film Festival will be more digital, especially that it has been proven successful in 2020?
I think the trend is clearly everyone is understanding you have to be digital in today's world, but the importance of that live event, that even if you don't go, there's that certain energy about being in a social environment. People crave social interaction.
Yes,
And
exactly.
And we're learning, at least in the U.S., I know it's a little bit different in Singapore, but in the U.S., certainly in New York, people are really starting to go out. People don't know whether, when you're outside, do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? But what is very clear is that the pent-up demand for social engagement is probably at an all-time high.
I think it's so important. I'm glad to hear that, because we are here in Singapore and we also crave very much the social connection, the energy, that there is nothing like face to face. There is nothing like human touch. There is nothing like going in person to the movie or to the theater or to the concert. So absolutely. And I know that the festival has added online gaming platforms. So what recently, isn't it? So what are the new initiatives and new programs that, on your opinion, would be rolled out and would be successful for moving forward?
Well, very early on, we concluded that just pure film in the world of film festivals, that single component was being pretty well served. But we had things that the underserved communities, for example, short films, films by filmmakers of color, video gaming, VR, AR, and a lot of platforms from almost the earliest days where we would be in these businesses. We were very early in the gaming business. Immersive has been a huge element for this year's festival. And what do we even mean by immersive in today's world? Is it AR, VR, live? Yeah. But it's something where you're really part of the experience. And that's that the immersive part. If for people who have used Oculus, etc., we have this dynamic balance between real life and then looking into these different screens. And someone once explained to me, I had a great analogy that for entertainment, we have screens that we can conceive of by the distance from our eyeballs. So, when you're watching a film on your, we're having a conversation and the phone's about, let's call it 12 inches from me. Television is probably 10 feet. When you go to a movie theater, it's probably 50 feet. When you go to an outdoor screening, it's 500 feet. So it's a very interesting, that screen and how we perceive the world is really quite an interesting dynamic. So I think the motto is all screens, all formats, all the time.
That's wonderful. And you know, ER and VR, I've done several events actually pre-COVID, believe it or not, on a VR platform, and the human interaction element is present there, which is great. So it's definitely sort of like a hybrid activation, and I think this is wonderful to keep, not to have it fully digital. I would like to talk. Still on the subject of course, TriBeCa Film Festival, but I want to talk to you and ask you questions about yet amazing activation that you co-founded, which is the Disruptive Awards. Once again, I'll say a few words to some of our listeners who are not aware of this award. It's in 2019, Craig co-founded the Disruptive Foundation with Harvard business professor Clay Christensen, father of disruptive innovation theory. Actually, in conversation with Craig, he mentioned to me that Professor Christensen had a strong link with Singapore and with Lee Kuan Yew himself, and which is incredible. It's such a amazing and unexpected, I should say, revelation. So since then, you've been a chief curator, or you've been a chief curator of the annual TriBeCa Disruptive Innovation Awards, which you created in 2010. Can you please tell us a little bit in the summary, what does the TriBeCa Disruptive Innovations Award actually all about?
Okay, so it requires a little bit of storytelling, and move me along if it's too slow. I met Professor Christensen, Clay Christensen, who wrote probably one of the most influential business books of all time, called The Innovator's Dilemma. And I met Clay right around 2000, so before TriBeCa. And I was working on a startup. He somehow heard about it. I met with him. He explained his theory. And from that first meeting, within 45 minutes, my entire life was turned upside down. It's a very counter.
That's what this disruption is all about, isn't it?
Exactly. And I'll give you in a nutshell, and that's why I say it takes a little bit of storytelling. The theory explains how simpler, cheaper products will dislodge entire industries that we call the incumbents. So if I mention to you Eastman Kodak, I don't know how popular Eastman Kodak was over in Asia, but everybody knew Eastman Kodak.
Plus,
they weren't able to make the transition, and literally cheap little cameras that kids were using on their Game Boy, the little video game platform, it looked like you could print out pictures like on a cash register tape, and that beginning ultimately ended to the demise of Eastman Kodak as we knew it. And from industry to industry, so the MP3 file, which the record industry disavowed and said no one is ever going to listen to an MP3 file. The sound's not good enough. Well, as it turns out, it was plenty good enough, particularly when the music was free on Napster. Unfortunately, Napster turned out to be illegal, but then everybody understood that that the music industry wasn't really driven but just by audio files. It was kids who would use transistor radios. It was good enough to get the job done. And that's the whole thrust of disruptive innovation. Doesn't have to be perfect. There's a great quote by Voltaire: "Perfection is the enemy of the good."
Exactly.
Or as we say, perfection is.
I love this quote.
Yes, and we just add a little flourish. Perfection is the enemy of the good enough.
But that's okay. That's very New York.
Well, but it explains how Wikipedia dislodged Encyclopedia Britannica. And then, so in the theory, people come in at the low end where it's not perfect, and they reach a whole new audience, and then over time they work their way up the quality chain. But rather than coming in at the top end, you come in at the low end. So that's the basic theory.
Okay.
So that's the background story. I hope that's not
background. Okay, and so basically the Innovation Awards are certainly very different kind of awards that celebrate and honor people who are making positive impacts in the society, right? And it touches different levels of the whole world of technology, biomed, and politics, and education, and religion, and healthcare, spirituality. What is the main goal of the awards?
So the awards, I started working with Clay back in 2000. By 2007, believe it or not, an eighth generation rabbi, Erwin Kula, joined Clay and myself, and the three of us created the foundation in 2009. And in 2010, we said, let's just see what would happen if we put on we'll explain Clay's theory to the arts community, filmmakers who are at the festival, see what the applications might be. But it really wasn't the awards aren't really about film per se.
Yeah.
So, occasionally there is a film involved, but it's really about different ways of looking at the world. And our honorees have ranged everywhere from the likely technology players that you would know. So, for example, Jack Dorsey was one of our honorees, the first awards. Eric Schmidt from Google, Jimmy Wales, who started Wikipedia. But we would also have very unexpected. We had the last awards, which because of COVID was back in 2019. We had an 8-year-old homeless boy from Nigeria who had moved to New York with his family, and he became the New York State chess champion.
Oh, I remember that. Yes.
And so for us, the storytelling is and I said, well, what does that have to do with innovation? And say, well, what is it that even a family that doesn't have a home can cultivate an 8-year-old to become completely immersed, to use that word, in the world of chess? And so we have a lot of unexpected honorees along with the expected. So it's just very eclectic and quirky. We had the mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki came to New York after we did our awards in Hiroshima. We had an atom bomb survivor, World Peace Prize winner, someone who's won 2 Nobel Prizes for economics. So it's a very different kind of award.
Eclectic, but very extremely extraordinary people, extraordinary projects and vision and passion, and incredible. And you mentioned Hiroshima. In 2017, you brought the first time ever the Disruptive Awards to Hiroshima, and to probably the ground zero, which is of course with a very huge correlation to September 11. Can you tell us a little bit about your trip and about your visit, and how did that strategy inspired you to stage that award there?
Yeah. Well, one of the takeaways of certainly my life is you just never know who you're going to meet and what they do. And I had a chance meeting with an artist. It was set up to meet an artist whose name is Canon Hersey. And so people are familiar, perhaps,
grandson of John Hersey.
Of John Hersey, who wrote the book, because the world did not really know what happened in Hiroshima. I'll go back and forth with my pronunciations just to keep people on their feet. So as I met Canon, he was telling me what he was doing and that he'd been working in Hiroshima, switching back. And I said, gee, by any chance are you related to John Hersey? And he said, yeah, that's my grandfather. Now, what you need to know is probably the only book I really, really remember from high school was reading Hiroshima by John Hersey. So I'm sitting with his grandson who's talking about Hiroshima and getting involved with our disruptive activities. And he said to me, would you ever consider doing the awards in Hiroshima? We have an event coming up in about 60 days at the time. And I instantly, just out of almost a knee-jerk reaction, how do you turn that down to do the awards in Hiroshima? And so we put the whole thing together in about 6 weeks and had an amazing experience at the original. And probably when people think of ground zero, I think Hiroshima is really the original ground zero.
The original. I have goosebumps when you tell me this story. And
well, one of the things that we discovered along the way, and I did not understand this until once we started working on putting the show together. In Hiroshima, they have, a lot of iconic images. They've got the tricycle, that people who have been literally incinerated into the pavement, and a lot of those images are about the horror of Hiroshima. And when you go there, you learn that one of the most important artifacts from the bomb is there are about 150 what they call survivor trees that are still have recovered and are still in full blossom and bloom. And that's really, for the insiders, they want to show you the survivor trees. And I knew nothing about the survivor trees. And then I don't even know how it popped into my mind, but at the World Trade Center, there is one survivor tree right in the middle of the park. It's a whole story. It was literally the only thing left of this tree was one branch and one leaf, but they were able to basically bring this plant back to life. It's now a gorgeous centerpiece. And so we had one survivor tree from Ground Zero in New York and 150 survivor trees in Hiroshima. And connecting the dots, they have a sapling program in Hiroshima where for certain types of events or organizations, you can have a Hiroshima survivor tree sapling. And they have the same thing in New York. They have a sapling program. And so we simply, connecting the dots, said, wouldn't it be great if we could exchange a New York Ground Zero survivor tree with one of the Hiroshima survivor trees? And so we did an exchange of survivor tree saplings. And they had
This is incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible story, emotional.
It was really very emotional. And when you plant the seed, they literally give you seeds. When you see that seed start to sprout, it's one of those goosebump moments that you and I talked about.
Yes, absolutely. Unbelievable. Who can apply for these awards? What is the criteria?
Well, because we're doing it, anybody can submit anything, and it's it's a curated event. At this point, at some point, it may be more of a jury oriented. But what we do is how do we tell a great story that connects? Usually, we have 20 to 25 honorees that has a theme that you have to really think about. Why are they recognizing these people? So each one of the honorees has a little bit of wisdom or a takeaway, and we try to thread it into a compelling narrative that you have to think about. And it's sort of almost like, I'll call it revealed wisdom, saying, oh, that's why they honored so-and-so. So it's a curated event, but anybody with a great idea, most of it's just all inbound. Did you see this story? Did you see that story?
And what are the one or two stories the names of the past winners of this award that really stand out in your mind?
Oh boy.
There are too many, but and you mentioned already one.
Stories.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you one quick story because this is about connecting the dots.
Yes, please.
And we talk about the unexpected, and I'll compress the story. And you've probably heard the expression, "Never let the facts get in the way of a good story." I'll try and keep it relatively short. As it turns out,
Craig, it's a pleasure to listen to you. So don't stress about taking your time, please.
Okay. So as it turns out, I was on like a group chat with my classmates, and we all had in the 8th and 9th grade a Latin teacher named Tibor Boronsky. And he was kind of a stern disciplinarian, not the kind of warm and cuddly type of teacher that, everybody would like to think they have. And someone said, I wonder whatever happened to Tibor Boronsky. And does anybody know what happened? And that just struck something in my mind, and I started doing a little bit of research, and I found the oral histories from Yad Vashem, and as it turns out, Tibor Boronsky was an uncelebrated Holocaust hero, and he saved more Jews working under the aegis of the Vatican. And
oh my God.
And it's a remarkable story that he never told anyone. When he got to the United States, he was, I believe he was in an internment camp in Russia. So he was stuck between the Nazis and the Russians. And and we found out this amazing story that really hadn't been told. But he's actually, we finally reached out to Tibor. It took us a while to track him down, and he was quite old. I think he was in his mid to late 90s. And we called and finally reached his son, and who said, "I'm really sorry to tell you, my dad passed away last night." And so we did a whole little event, during this about the unsung heroes you just never know. And it was one of the most emotional stories that I came across. But it's never doubt a person who you are underestimating might have done amazing things, and the humility to not even tell people. And there was no record or school of his involvement. So we're actually going to do a planting at some point up at our school in his honor of a 9/11 sapling as well as a Hiroshima sapling. So that was a very emotional story. Which, imagine having your Latin teacher being, pick any one of the great heroes. Oscar Schindler is your, and you don't know about it. So
incredible, but this is what this award's all about. When people find the passion in unexpected ways to improve the world, and they come out of their routine and they put their minds and passion all together. And this doesn't mean that it's not known, but they're doing the deed, they're doing good. And this is actually brings me to philanthropy. And once again, when we spoke at length. We got together just for our listeners to know. We had this incredible Lake Como Symposium for Celebrity Philanthropy, masterminded by our mutual wonderful friend Jenny. And we got together there with Craig and with a number of our wonderful friends. And we spoke about philanthropy, and this is exactly what you stated to me just recently when we spoke, that, and I'm quoting you, to do well and doing good for the purpose. And this is, can you please tell me a little bit, what do you mean by that? Well, with regards to philanthropy.
Yes, and I think, there are two basic models that people think about. One is the for-profit model, and then there's a not-for-profit model. We took a slightly different approach and said, let's not worry about the model. Let's figure out what the purpose is. Then we'll figure out how to capitalize it or attract the benefactors, the sponsors, the investors. But I think this notion of it's a for-purpose endeavor rather than it's a not-for-profit or for-profit, that's just the structure. But find something. So one of the first examples is, if you remember Tom's shoes, it was the first, if you bought a pair of the relatively inexpensive shoes, they were somewhere between a sneaker and a sandal, they would put a pair of shoes on the feet of a child in Africa.
Yes,
so it's called the one for one. You buy one.
That's right, one for one. Yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah. And Tom's is a for-profit company, but it has a purpose.
Yes,
and so
exactly.
Blake Oski, who's one of our honorees, became the chief, what they call him, the chief shoe giver. That was his title, chief shoe giver. And AT&T saw the story and turned it into an international campaign about Tom's shoes. And then that was really when Tom's shoes took off.
Here you go. And, you just to mention to our listeners that Craig was now actually was a founder and one of the, how shall I say it? You were named one of the 40th on Barron's list, the American Weekly magazine published by Dow Jones, of the world's top 25 philanthropists for your role in regenerating TriBeCa economy after September 11. I just had to mention that because it is absolute truth. And so going back or continuing with celebrities, Craig, because you are the celebrity in full right and full word of it, how important it is for celebrities to be involved in philanthropy?
Well, I think, the world is clearly changing, and a lot of it has been driven by, and I'm going to make a slight distinction between influencers and celebrities, but celebrities today they are very sophisticated, not just a basketball player, but an industry. So if you look at almost every top athlete, They have entire strategies that involve philanthropy, merchandising, appearances. You know, it's a fully like a 360 approach,
Yeah.
and they can do an enormous amount in terms of raising awareness. When you take in today's polarized world, it's a little bit tricky because if it doesn't matter which side you pick, you're likely to alienate half of, certainly in America, no matter
Yes.
what you do.
Yes. Yes.
You're going to alienate half.
I have to do another episode on that with you.
Okay, we can do
Yes.
that. But I think celebrities more and more, here's the real key. The most important word is authenticity.
Yeah.
If it's an authentic endeavor and the celebrity really believes in it and is active, and there are many, many examples, whether it's Sean Penn, who's done a lot, a little bit controversial, who's done amazing things, but he lives it, he breathes it. Matt Damon did had water.org. If you're really involved, as opposed to just lending your name and,
Yes.
just the eyeballs, the ones that really take on these causes, and you're seeing it more and more because celebrities understand the importance that if they don't do this, it's part of the branding strategy overall. But if you're going to do it, do something you love anyway, because then it's not really, I have to go do this. This becomes my purpose. And you see many, many examples. But in today's world, someone can have 200 million followers or 300 million followers on Instagram, and they're more, they have a bigger impact than almost anything else, just because they're able to reach their fan base.
Yes. So you think that so you think social media is a solid vessel for the celebrities to promote the cause? And
well, it's part of it. I think you have to do the whole, the 360 approach is really critical.
Yes.
But if it's not authentic, the fan base will see right through it in 2 seconds.
Yes, it's just a visual icon, and then you move on. Yes,
right.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
The expression is they sold out, and
yes.
you don't want to be a sellout.
Yes, I'm very much aware of it. Even for me personally, I'm certainly not a celebrity, but I do quite a lot of fundraising here in Singapore. And social media, I have a love and hate relationship with it. So I absolutely visit. Yes. So not to be politically correct, we are moving to another subject, and something very, very different, and something very beautiful and soft. And this is your love for animals, and that gravitated into writing incredible books, and your kindness as a parent through these books that you write, and it's carried this is. This is a very, very profound message. Most of your books are related to the animals. And in fact, the turtle part was inspired by the real world issues, right, involving animals. Can you please tell us a little bit about this passion of yours and love for animals and books?
Yeah, well, I don't know. My mother did not like animals. So it was but I loved animals, and I had a very close friend who had more pets than anybody I could imagine, and I just always had a love for animals. I found them almost magical, and over time, somewhere along the way on my bucket list, and don't ask me exactly how, when, or where this came up. My bucket list included I'd like to write a children's book. That was just something I had a librarian when I was in 4th grade, Alice T. Cross. I still remember her name.
I remember.
Special interest and kept giving me more and more children's books. And I never really understood. I said, how do you write a children's? I mean, do they invite you to write one? How do you even do it? I mean, I was, at the time, I think I was in 5th grade. And then along the way, we just had an opportunity came along. We did a couple of children's books before we got very focused. I did one with Jane, my former wife, and about a little tree frog. That was true. But I also wrote a children's book with my daughter, Juliana,
Yes.
Tonsils out.
And yes. When we met years ago in New York, you were just putting that whole thing together. I remember. Yes.
So we wrote a book about having your tonsils out, which
Yes.
there was really nothing else out there. And surprisingly, and we did it like as a journal, and we found Penguin offered, because there were no books out about kids in surgery, and
Yes.
shockingly, it became a bestseller. We had no, it was just a project to do with Juliana. It was never an intention of anything more than that. And after the tonsils book came out, my younger daughter, Isabella, said, "Daddy, when can we do our book?" And so I said, "Well, we have to find a story we want to write about." And actually, I can show you. I brought along a copy.
So,
Tell me if you can see this. Is that?
Yes, the hippos.
Yes. So it's a baby hippo.
Yes.
So it's a 600-pound baby hippo who is an orphan, snuggling with a 700-pound Aldabran tortoise.
Turtle.
In
Oh my God. Yeah.
in the newspaper, and Isabella said, "Daddy, can we do our story about Owen and Mazay?" Owen was the baby hippo, Mazay is the giant tortoise. And I said, "Well, let's see what happens." We sent a few emails, had a few phone calls, and since we had done a couple of books already, we ended up doing literally an ebook. We just did it ourselves, and we launched it on the 5 o'clock news. Now, you saw that one picture of them snuggling, and when we saw this, we said, "Okay, that's a great picture. What other pictures they have?" The pictures were spectacular. And the two of them lived together for 2 years, and the hippo was raised by the tortoise.
That's incredible.
And it became one of the most famous animal stories. And we just happened to be right place, right time. We did our ebook, and then Scholastic Books, the publisher of Harry Potter, saw that we'd done this little ebook and said, "We'd like to turn it into a real book." And so I said, "Okay, let's give it a shot." And it became it was a runaway hit. It sort of changed, we're a tiny little sliver of the book industry, but in our tiny sliver, this is sort of the Harry Potter of this tiny little sliver. So we've done about a dozen or so books about animals. The last one we did, in fact, I have this picture. If you remember, can you see that? Is that held up?
Yes, yes.
Remember Cecil the lion, who was killed by the dentist?
Yes.
And what we decided, because these are children's books, was not to focus on the death of Cecil, which is what the news was covering. Had more media coverage of Cecil than anything else, almost in history. It went completely viral. But we told the life story, the life of Cecil, not the death of Cecil.
This is incredible. Talking about inclusive community and how you tell the story of the the real world issues through your books is really admirable, really. And I believe that at one point you've counted about 30 pets in one time. And you told me the story about it actually. You're welcome to share it with us as well.
I'll do it in the form of an advisory warning for people. If you're buying 2 hamsters, make sure they are either both female or both male. And we were assured we were buying on a Friday 2 male hamsters at the pet store. As it turned out, by Monday morning, we had our first litter of, I think, about 14 baby hamsters. And then every 12 days thereafter, they just keep going. So, but we've had a lot of different pets, 3 dogs. Our mutual friend Jenny started co-parenting.
I was babysitting your dog at one point.
Ruby was the sweetest.
I loved it.
Yeah, two amazing golden retrievers.
Yes, we miss them.
Yes, and so, but animals sort of bring magic into people's lives. And I think I told you, we use, when people say, "What stories do you tell?" I think I told you this before. We use what's called the goosebump principle, which is no goosebumps, no interest. So the story has to really.
This is how I feel when I talk to you, 100%. So if I would have not have goosebumps with you, I would have not have conversations with Olga with you in it today. That's for sure. So before we end today, I would like to actually to mention yet another talent that you possess, and forgive me for mentioning that, but you know, I know that you have written rock operas about Galileo. How cool is it? I mean, it's like really incredible. So I really had to mention that. So if you want to elaborate on it a little bit, we would love to hear that.
Yes, this has been my passion project, and you know, I will hopefully see it to its ultimate fruition. But it started back in the early '90s when I first heard the story about Galileo, and the traditional narrative of Galileo is the big bad church didn't know where the center of the universe was. They imprisoned Galileo, tortured him, and executed him. The real story is much more nuanced, and I fell in love with the story, which is really his relationship with the Pope, who goes down in history as one of the dark, poorly regarded characters. In reality, he was Galileo's benefactor, his supporter, his friend. He understood all the science, and then they had a falling out, which we don't have time to go into.
Yeah.
And the Pope finally said, "I can't handle you anymore," and he turned him to the Inquisition. But I fell in love with the story and said, how is it that history just tells one side of the story? This is a much more interesting, at least, to balance it out. There's always more than one side to the story. And I ended up writing a rock opera with a fellow, if you remember the band Deep Purple. I don't know if you know Deep Purple or Rainbow.
Of course. Oh, who doesn't remember Deep Purple? Of course.
Well, so the lead singer from Deep Purple worked on this project with me for literally almost 10 years. And we wrote a rock opera together. It's the story of Galileo. We did one performance back in 2003, but from that performance, in the audience was someone who works with the Vatican and who tracked me down and said, would you consider doing this in collaboration with the Vatican? Pope John Paul II loves rock. We know he loves Bono. Yes. He loves rock and roll. And so I spent 2 years working with the Vatican, trying to launch it. And then unfortunately, Pope John Paul II died. And, Pope Benedict was less a fan of rock and roll. We'll leave it at that.
You still stand a chance. You have to
we have a new Pope
project.
Yes. So it's on my shelf of unfinished projects that I hope to bring to fruition.
And, I just want to point our listeners to your Instagram site, because you do, looking at this, at the background, the Empire State Building is a prop.
There we go. Right there.
Yes, okay, so what just all of you, our friends, I just need to mention to you that Craig's photographs of the same prop are incredible, because he takes them at the different times of the day and night, and the light that expresses and mood of each photograph is absolutely incredible. So please take a look at your leisure, and you'll absolutely enjoy it. And I just want to thank you, Craig, once again and again and again and again. And we have to do another conversation. We'll definitely find plenty of subjects and topics to talk and stories to discover. And I look forward to see you. I will say a few words once again to where you can watch our episode. It will be posted immediately. It will be covered on Instagram, on my Instagram at Events by Olga. I will also post it on YouTube channel under Olga Serlis. So please visit and revisit and listen to all the other episodes. Right now I have 19, and I have a number of them already planned for the following weeks and months. So please join us. And Craig, thank you so much again and again. And I really hope, I still have plans to come to New York. I haven't seen the kids for too long. So I'm looking forward, and we definitely will regroup. And I see you very soon, I hope.
I thank you for having me. And anytime, even on short notice, I'm happy to do a conversation with Olga.
Fantastic. Oh, that's great to know. We certainly will do one again.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye. Bye.